Silently, an entire generation of men is walking away from love, not out of weakness, not out of bitterness, but because they have seen something too sharp, too clear to ignore, that in order to preserve themselves, they must let go of what they once longed for most. Kierkegaard once warned that the greatest danger in life is to lose oneself. And today, love packaged as happiness, romance, fulfillment has become the very force that threatens to erase men's sense of self. Picture it. A successful man, financially free, respected, and yet, each night, he returns to an empty apartment, not because he cannot love, but because he has chosen not to. No more chasing relationships that hollow out the soul. No more trading freedom for approval. This isn't just one man's story. It's a silent movement, a quiet exodus from the illusions of modern romance. Kierkegaard, if he were alive today, would recognize it instantly. Sometimes, walking away is not defeat. It is the deepest form of self-respect. The moment a man chooses solitude over self-betrayal is the moment he reclaims the only thing that truly belongs to him, his own existence. False programming. The quiet trap. There's a lie whispered into the ears of men from the moment they can listen, that love is their purpose, that without a relationship, they are incomplete, that marriage is the final proof of manhood. But quietly, the numbers are telling a different story. According to a study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, men today are 50% less likely to pursue romantic relationships than their fathers were. 1 in 3 men under 30 report zero sexual activity in the past year. And these aren't outliers. This is a statistical shift, a collective step back. At first glance, it looks like weakness, like apathy. But beneath the surface is something colder: calculation. Men are running the numbers, consciously or not, and they're seeing a pattern Kierkegaard himself warned about over 150 years ago. He wrote, "Marry, and you will regret it. Do not marry, and you will also regret it." A paradox that has haunted men across centuries. But in the modern age, science seems to be siding with Kierkegaard's darker instinct. A landmark study from the University of Chicago in 2018 found that single, childless men reported higher overall happiness than their married counterparts. Across measures of life satisfaction, freedom, and stress levels, single men came out ahead. And yet, society refuses to update its programming. We still raise boys to believe that success equals finding a wife, building a family, living out the suburban script. But what if that script is broken? A psychological science study tracked over 11,000 couples and revealed a harsh truth. Men's marital happiness drops sharply after the first year, while women's happiness remains relatively stable. Why? Because modern love demands that men fit into a mold that was never made for them: provider, protector, emotional anchor, without asking if those roles serve them. Kierkegaard called this the despair of possibility, the agony of knowing no matter which path you choose, regret waits. But here's the twist. In the past, men didn't have a choice. Today, they do. And more of them are choosing solitude not as surrender, but as strategy. Consider this. When a man pours years into building a life, only to see it dismantled in a courtroom because she wasn't happy, it doesn't just break him emotionally, it teaches him. A Cornell University study found that 70% of divorces are initiated by women, most citing unhappiness rather than abuse or infidelity. So men step back. They observe. They calculate the cost of love in the modern world, not just financially, but spiritually. And increasingly, they decide the price is too high. This isn't bitterness, it's clarity. Modern love has become the perfect incubator for Kierkegaard's sickness unto death, a quiet, creeping despair that doesn't kill you outright but erodes you piece by piece. And that's why so many men now choose something unthinkable to previous generations: voluntary disengagement. Not because they hate women, but because they refuse to lose themselves. The programming was false. The script was never written with their freedom in mind. And now they're tearing up the page. Let me tell you 2 stories. One begins with a man on his knees, the other with a man walking away. James was 32 when his fiancée left him. No warning, no betrayal. just a single sentence. I don't feel the spark anymore. He was left in an empty apartment, holding the engagement ring he'd planned to offer her. Society tells men in that moment to move on. Get back out there. Find someone new. But James did something else. At first, he drank. He distracted himself. Nights blurred into mornings. Until one evening, while scrolling aimlessly online, he stumbled across a quote from Kierkegaard. "The knight of faith is obliged to rely upon himself alone." That sentence hit him harder than the breakup ever could. James stopped chasing love. Instead, he embraced the silence. He traveled 14 countries in 12 months. Alone. He built a consulting business that tripled his income. But more than money, he found something rarer: himself. A study from the Journal of Positive Psychology confirms James's path wasn't unique. Men who voluntarily embraced solitude for 6 months or more reported a 72% increase in self-confidence, creativity, and emotional resilience. Then there's David. At 38, David was a successful corporate lawyer. 6 figures, downtown office, tailored suits. But every morning, looking in the mirror, he saw someone else staring back. Someone hollowed out. One night, after finalizing a high-stakes merger, David packed a single bag and walked away. No goodbye party, no grand announcement, just silence. He bought a cabin in Montana. No internet, no phone signal. For months, he wrote only for himself. Quiet essays about masculinity, loss, solitude. At first, no one read them. Then, one piece went viral. Within a year, David's words had reached over 500,000 men who felt just as lost, just as tired. The world called David radical, irresponsible. But Kierkegaard would have understood. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but if one will are to be lived. That's what both James and David discovered. There is an economy of emotions no one teaches men. The more they invest in others at the expense of themselves, the poorer they become. And yet, when they stop trying to be needed, when they choose solitude not as punishment, but as discipline, they don't become weaker, they become sovereign. History confirms this pattern. From Nietzsche to Beethoven, from Tesla to Kierkegaard himself. Men transform heartbreak not into bitterness, but into something rarer, creative fuel. This is what society doesn't want men to remember. That walking away from love isn't always failure. Sometimes, it's the first step toward building a life no one else controls. James found that in silence. David found it in the wilderness. And you, if you're listening closely, might already feel that quiet pull in your own life. Not loneliness, liberation. There's a reason history remembers men like Nietzsche, Beethoven, and Tesla. Not simply because they were brilliant, but because each of them faced a moment of absolute personal collapse and, instead of being destroyed, they used that collapse as fuel. Nietzsche fell in love with a woman named Lou Salome. She rejected him, not once, but twice. What followed wasn't rage or bitterness. It was the writing of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, his most powerful, most enduring work. Beethoven, deaf and heartbroken, composed his greatest symphonies in complete silence. No audience, no applause, just him alone with the echo of his own mind. Nikola Tesla, after a lifelong pattern of romantic disappointment, turned away from love altogether. He spent his nights alone in hotel rooms, sketching machines that would change the world. What connects these men isn't genius. It's what Kierkegaard called the leap to faith, the moment when a man stops seeking answers outside himself and confronts the terrifying freedom of his own existence. And modern psychology confirms this isn't just myth or legend. A 2021 Harvard study tracked men who experienced severe romantic rejection and channeled that energy into creative or intellectual pursuits. The result: those men were 3 times more likely to achieve extraordinary success than those who moved on conventionally. It sounds counterintuitive. We're told that heartbreak destroys us, that without love, a man withers. But Kierkegaard saw something deeper. He wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. When a man loses the relationship he thought defined him, he stands at a precipice. He can either fall or fly. But this isn't about bitterness. It's not about becoming cold for the sake of being cold. It's about recognizing that pain itself can be transformed, not ignored, not hidden, transformed. David, the corporate lawyer who walked away, understood this. James, kneeling on the floor with an unused engagement ring, understood it too. Both of them felt the bottom fall out from under their lives. And both of them chose to build something new, rather than cling to something broken. It's here that the archetype of the nice guy collapses. The man who spends his life seeking approval, trying to be enough for others, eventually reaches a point where no amount of effort can save the relationship. And in that moment, he faces a choice. Most men collapse inward, but summarily step outward. These are the men who write symphonies, who build empires, who, in silence, craft lives that no longer depend on being needed. Kierkegaard called them knights of infinite resignation, men who let go of everything: love, approval, certainty, in order to find something higher. And once that strength is found, it cannot be unlearned. Pain becomes discipline, loss becomes clarity, and heartbreak, instead of ending a man, becomes the moment he is finally born. There is a silent truth society rarely speaks. An emotionally self-sufficient man is dangerous. Not dangerous in the way headlines suggest, violent or unstable, but dangerous because he cannot be controlled. Because he no longer needs validation, affection, or approval to feel whole. Modern culture thrives on keeping men dependent on products, on relationships, on external affirmation. The system is not designed for the man who looks around, shrugs, and says, "I'm enough." Kierkegaard sensed this long before the modern world existed. He called it the solitary arrow, a man flying towards an unknown target. A man who relies on no one but himself terrifies those around him. Consider the story of Victor. At 41, Victor was a successful neuroscientist, twice divorced, emotionally gutted. His second marriage ended in betrayal so sharp it nearly broke him. For months, he hovered on the edge of self-destruction. But instead of falling, Victor stepped away. He spent 5 years in deliberate solitude, waking at dawn to read Kierkegaard, training jiu-jitsu at midnight, rebuilding not just his body but his mind. Somewhere in that long silence, Victor found something most men never reach: absolute self-sufficiency. Then, as if to test him, life presented a challenge. At the height of his transformation, Victor met a woman. Brilliant, independent, emotionally whole. She didn't want to fix him. She didn't need him to complete her. And yet, Victor did what almost no man would dare. He walked away. Not because he hated her, not because he feared love, but because he had reached a place where even love was optional. This is what Kierkegaard called the dizziness of freedom. When a man finally detaches from every external tether, even the deepest desires become choices, not needs. And here lies the true danger. A self-sufficient man doesn't buy endlessly to fill a void. He doesn't tolerate toxic relationships because he's afraid to be alone. He becomes, as Kierkegaard warned, untouchable in spirit. Modern systems aren't built for this kind of man. Markets want dependents, not sovereigns. Relationships want caretakers, not equals. A 2022 study in the Quarterly Journal of Experimental Psychology supports this. Men who embraced voluntary solitude showed a 40% increase in cognitive performance, decisiveness, and risk-taking. Why? Because they stopped second-guessing themselves through the lens of what others might think. Victor wasn't running from intimacy. He was choosing something higher, total alignment with himself. And that is the power most dangerous to the world around him: not violence, not control, but quiet, unshakable independence. History remembers men like Victor, Tesla, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard himself. Men who, once they found themselves fully, never let the world pull them back into dependency. The Stoic shift is not bitterness, it's clarity. When a man realizes he needs nothing, neither applause nor affection, he becomes something modern society can't easily categorize. He becomes free. There is a kind of coldness that destroys, and there is a kind of coldness that preserves. Modern men are beginning to understand the difference. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood. Society calls it avoidance, fear, or bitterness. But in truth, for the man who has suffered enough, detachment becomes something else entirely: discipline. Victor's story is the clearest example. A man who spent years in solitude, rebuilt from the ashes of 2 failed marriages, and then at the very moment life offered him connection again, chose to walk away. Not out of spite, not out of pride, but because he had trained himself to need nothing he could not provide for himself. This is not a weakness. It is strength, and it is far more attractive than most realize. A 2024 meta-study, published in Evolutionary Psychological Science, analyzed 2,000 years of mating patterns. The finding was both startling and predictable. Women have always been most attracted to men who appeared indifferent to them. Not cruel, not dismissive, simply focused on something greater than romance. There is a reason for this. True emotional detachment signals something rare in the modern world: sovereignty. Kierkegaard saw it long before data could prove it. "The crowd is untruth," he wrote. "When a man lives according to the expectations of others, whether friends, family, or lovers, ceases to be fully himself." Victor embodied that insight. His refusal to reattach wasn't a rejection of love, but of compromise. Because once a man has built himself in the furnace of solitude, he refuses to tear down what he's built just to fit into someone else's frame. And that coldness, that calm refusal is what makes him dangerous. It changes the way he moves, speaks, even exists. It's no accident that modern dating data supports this. A 2022 OkCupid analysis revealed that 83% of women under 35 swipe left on men who display excessive self-sufficiency in their profiles. The reason, as one respondent put it, "He seems like he doesn't need me." That is the paradox. The less a man needs, the more he becomes desired. The more self-contained he is, the more others want to break through his silence. But this is not a game. It's not about withholding affection to manipulate outcomes. It's about reaching a level of discipline where one's center cannot be shaken by desire, whether that desire comes from within or from others. History has always honored men who lived this way. The samurai, the Stoics, the solitary philosophers. Men who understood that while love can be beautiful, it should never be a man's purpose. Emotional detachment, at its highest level, is not emptiness. It is presence being so fully aligned with one's own soul that no external storm can pull it off course. Victor knew it. Kierkegaard knew it. And perhaps deep down, every man who has ever walked away from something he once thought he couldn't live without knows it too. The crowd may whisper, may jeer, but the man who stands alone hears only silence. And in that silence, he finds something rarer than love. He finds himself. There is a quiet shift happening beneath the surface of modern society. A new kind of man is emerging, one that both fascinates and unsettles the world around him. He is independent, self-contained, emotionally sovereign, and paradoxically, because of that, he is often alone. The data confirms it. A 2022 OkCupid analysis revealed that 83% of women under 35 swipe left on men who display too much self-sufficiency in their profiles. Not because these men lack value, but because, as one woman put it, "He seems like he doesn't need me." This is the paradox of modern romance. The more a man embodies strength, clarity, and independence, the more invisible he becomes in the mating market. Women are culturally conditioned to seek emotional caretakers, providers, or validation seekers, not solitary arrows flying toward unknown targets. Kierkegaard sensed this tension long before dating apps existed. "The crowd is untruth," he warned. "The crowd wants men to be predictable, dependent, easy to categorize. But the sovereign man defies these categories. He is not here to be chosen. He chooses himself." And increasingly, this is not a fringe phenomenon. A 2025 Pew Research study found that 42% of never-married men under 40 now identify as romantically disengaged, not lonely, but sovereign. These men are not hiding in bitterness. They are building lives structured around purpose, not partnership. They volunteer more, they create more art, They report higher levels of existential fulfillment than their coupled peers. Consider this. Previous generations measured a man's worth by his relationship status. Today, more men are asking a different question, not, "Who am I to her?" but, "Who am I to myself?" This shift isn't about avoiding responsibility. It's about rejecting unnecessary dependency. Emotional detachment becomes a discipline, a deliberate choice rather than an accident of circumstance. Society struggles with this because systems economic, relational, cultural are built on the assumption that men will seek approval, that they will work harder, spend more, endure more, just to feel chosen. But the new generation of sovereign men isn't playing by those rules. And women are noticing. Dating app data shows a 300% increase in searches for what's now being called Kierkegaardian men, defined as intense, introspective, emotionally contained. The paradox is complete. The less these men chase, the more they are pursued. Yet here's the subtle truth Kierkegaard himself hinted at. Even when love returns to find these men, it does not enter in the old form. It does not come with demands, expectations, or obligations. It comes quietly, as an invitation, not as a requirement. The sovereign man's greatest power is not in what he refuses, but in what he no longer requires. Love becomes an option, not a lifeline. And that is why this generation is quietly rewriting the rules, not through protest or rebellion, but through quiet disengagement, through the simple, radical act of living for themselves first. The crowd may never understand. But then again, the crowd was never meant to. By 2025, Pew Research revealed a quiet statistic with loud implications. 42% of never-married men under 40 now identify as romantically disengaged, not lonely, not bitter, sovereign. These are not men hiding from love. These are men who have outgrown the need to chase it. Here lies the paradox. Kierkegaard always circled but never fully named. The less a man pursues, the more he is pursued. The more self-contained he becomes, the more others try to draw him out. But for these men, it's no longer a game worth playing. Kierkegaard once wrote, "The truth is a snare. You cannot have it without being caught." And that is exactly what's happening. Men have stumbled onto a truth too clear to ignore. The greatest love affair of their lives was never meant to be with a woman, but with the man they could have been had they never compromised. Not the version who sought approval, not the version who lived to be chosen, but the one who stands alone, fully alive in his own skin. This is not an ending. It's a new beginning. Quiet revolution unfolding not on screens or stages, but in silent apartments, empty gyms, quiet libraries, where men finally choose themselves first, and in doing so, become truly free.